what the media are saying, what experts have been saying, what some Nigerians and even most Nigerians have been saying about, reducing cost of governance. Finally, President Bola Ahmed Tinubu has listened, and they're taking the first step into, implementing that. And we hope that, all of this come to fruition in a way that it would favor the country. So, as the minister said, there are some agencies that will be scrapped, some would be merged, and some would be subsumed. But then, the scrapped is the most, a bit dicey part that we want to see how it happened, considering even though the minister made mention that there will not, nobody is losing their job, but something, it definitely would not favor everyone, related to that. But then anyway, we have in the studio to discuss all of these things, so that Nigerians will understand every details of what this entails. In the studio is Dengiefa Angalapu. Mr. Angalapu is a research analyst with the Center for Democracy and Development, and he'll be joining us to talk about all of these things. Good morning, and thank you for joining us.
Good morning. Good to see you,
Nigeria. Yeah.
Thank you for stopping by.
All right, let's hear your thoughts. I would say that you're even one of those people that have been advocating for cost, reducing the cost for governors. So what was your first reaction, when this news broke out?
Yeah, so for starters, we think, and of course personally I also think that, it's a very, very bold step. And if there is one thing to commend this government for, it is the ability to have taken very crucial and then bold steps. But the flip side of it is that it is in those bold steps that we've also seen some of the controversies and some of the hiccups that has marred the governance issues that we now have. For example, for a very long time, the government in Nigeria have been telling Nigerians to sacrifice. And it appears that Nigerians have been sacrificing every single thing that they have, including their dignity. And what is left, perhaps, is now the fact that Nigerians are perhaps now the sacrifice. So for example, someone in a POS business, or perhaps selling in a supermarket, that earns perhaps 15,000 naira in a month, there is nothing else to sacrifice anymore. What is left is the person is now at the altar of sacrifice. The person is now specifically the sacrifice because he is practically sacrificing his life at the altar of starvation and hunger. So it is a very good step that the government is now looking at its own end to see if we can sacrifice also. And of course, this is the second one. We saw that at first the president came up with the issue of allowances for travel allowances and how to cut people attached for different travel locations. We saw how many people went for that climate change conference and all of that, and all of the uproar that came with that in times where we are facing lots of inflation, unemployment, and all of that. So it is good that the government is thinking in this direction, but it is not also a silver bullet. It is one that is a bit very controversial, and one that will have to be thought through, much like the COVID-19 arrangement. So the government has said we are relocating some agencies. They've also said some will be subsumed. They've also said some others will be merged. That's a very critical point. But they've also said that nobody will lose their jobs. I can imagine. I can't seem to wrap my head around that, because if you have a director in a particular agency and then you merge it with another director, we possibly cannot have same directors for the same department. So it would mean that I think it's a political way of saying maybe somebody will lose their job, but we don't want to say it now, right? So I really think that there is a lot to be done, even in terms of inefficiency and effectiveness. Like you said, there are many agencies that, even as organizations that are responsible for advocating for governance, we don't even know, right? Because they are just there, practically doing nothing and just increasing the cost of governance. But you also need to understand the socio-cultural context and political context in which this organization, these agencies exist. Nigeria is, ethnic in nature. Nigeria is, operates basically a patronage system. So you might be surprised to see that some of those agencies were created based off of friendship. Just that, okay, as a means of political settlement. So it's important to interrogate those variables. So it is when they are, now it's sounding all rosy. It is when the implementation begins that we will now see all of the outcry. Somebody will say, oh, you have actually removed somebody from an ethnic group, and then all of the agencies now are now representing people from same ethnic nationality. Those outcries will come. Another outcry will be that, oh, now you've actually systematically subsumed some agencies under perhaps agencies that are headed by Christians or headed by Muslims and different kind of. So I think it's a really very bold step, and I really want to see how the government will pull this through. Let us not also forget that it is a test of the relationship between the executive and the legislature. They've given themselves practically 3 months. I mean, this is what the Oronsaye report from 2011 to 2019. It's about 12 years. So but they've given themselves 12 months. Three months to get this thing done. Yeah. It will mean that they want to see how the level of fraternal relationship that the executive has with the legislature, because some of those agencies were created, out of legislation with act of parliament. So how will they, convince the diverse 10th assembly that we have, to all agree, to either subsume, to relocate, or even to merge, those agencies?
And in talking about the Oronsaye report, let's get a feel of what it actually means, because it's quite a very detailed report, an extensive one that covers pretty much everything, and it has had so many pushbacks, when it came out, with regards to the agencies that need to be subsumed, agencies that need to be scrapped, and so on and so forth. And the political will was not there to work on all of these things. Give me a sense of, for some of our viewers who are hearing about this report for the very first time, what it represents in terms of the net positive, cutting the cost of governance, and also streamlining the productivity of government itself.
Yeah, so the Oronsaye report was brought on board in 2011 by Goodluck Jonathan. It was basically seeking to answer the question of effectiveness, efficiency, and then reducing the cost of governance. We saw that in Nigeria we have over 900 agencies. Even going by the present ministerial portfolios that we have 45, and we are saying that the government at that time thought that it wasn't a very wise thing that our revenues we have very small revenues, and of course we are a monocultural economy dependent on oil, and the revenue the flow of the revenues are very slim. So it wasn't very wise for us to have all of these agencies, especially because many of them were duplicating the functions of others. So of course you have the ICPC, you have EFCC, practically almost doing the same thing, and then you now have the Office of the Auditor General, really. So those kind of things. You have the police force, you have the civil defense, and all that. So we're practically doing this, doing same kind of duty. So it's like, no, it is important that we reduce the cost of governance, and that is the principle of modern management, right? So you want to use as less as resources that you can use to get optimum results. Right. So that was the idea behind it. But like I said, you have to look at the socio-cultural context in which these things happen, and sometimes it is easier not to allow things happen than to correct them. them. These MDs have been created, people are now there, and in a country where people are talking about unemployment and increasing inflation, the idea is that, oh, we are talking about the reduction in unemployment, and you want to throw people, it's a systematic way to throw people back to, to the labor market, really. So, of course, no matter what you think of it, whether or not they are productive or not, people are employed in those places, and they have families, and of course, yeah, so.
The Minister of Information and National Orientation, in trying to provide clarity, said no one is going to lose their job. So as far as redundancy is concerned, it's not going to be something that people have to worry about. And that brings the question of, why are we doing it then? If I thought the whole point is to save cost, right? There's definitely the overhead cost that will be saved. The analysis was that if this report was implemented, even when it was published or made public, it would have saved Nigeria close to ₦1 trillion. Now you can only imagine how much more that money would mean to the coffers of the government and for the services that need to be rendered. Give me a sense of, they talk about the 3 months period to do this. We clearly know that some of these agencies or commissions are a product of a legislation, a product of an act, which means we still have to go back to the National Assembly to repeal it, go through the normal proceedings, first, second reading, and then repeal this act. Do you think there is an alignment between what the federal government is trying to achieve? And speaking to the political equation that you talked about, where it's about compensation, it's about rewarding political allies and things like that, and also about representation, where certain groups feel represented because one of their son, one of their daughters is heading this commission or is heading that agency. But now, if they've been subsumed, it means that representation in government doesn't exist anymore, for at least for this particular group. How do we square this circle to do what is right, do what is needed, and also calm the nerves of people who will feel marginalized because of these decisions?
Well, that has been the challenge of the Nigerian state. We are in a dilemma and in a very strange paradox where we want to move forward, but we don't want to let go of some of these primordial affiliations and issues that we have. And I think that's a very, very serious challenge. It will take a president that says, perhaps I don't give I don't really care about whether or not I win my second tenure election or not to be able to do some of these things, because whether you like it or not, these things will matter. These things will matter, and even when you look at how the choice of implementing the Oronsaye report, I would think that the president perhaps must have thought deeply of the political implications. So, for example, you have 45 ministers and ministries now. You practically increase the ministries from what we had before. So the question is, why don't you start from there that do not even require substantial legislation? That's practically within your power to do, to say, okay, fine. I think that after a year, or almost a year, we've realized the fact that 45 ministries, it's too expensive. So let us cut it down to perhaps 20 or even 15. In the US, we just have 15 ministries, what they call department. So why don't you start from there, really? So it is really about transferring the challenge to areas that has less political undertone. But that also does not solve the challenge, because when implementation begins, these things are going to be brought to bear. So, for example, I imagine that now that you are trying to take the school that the army controls into the defense, into the National Defense Academy, you will get to realize that there will be lots of interagency rivalry. People will still be thinking that perhaps we don't belong here, and so the government needs to have a plan to say, okay, fine. When we are taking these agencies, when they are being subsumed and merged, do we even have a conflict resolution mechanism? Do we have a strategy for them to work seamlessly together? Because it will be a challenge where some agencies, when they are merged, will just be acting in a means to sabotage the effort of the parent agency agency because they feel that perhaps maybe we shouldn't be merged with you, should have been merged with us rather. So it is going to be a lot of challenges.
There's a room for rivalry here?
Yes, of course. Right. Yes, it's going to happen. So let's say I am a director in my own agency. I practically controlled every single thing, and then you now merge me with another agency. Perhaps someone that was that I'm practically a senior within the civil service cadre, and would you want that kind of person in the Nigerian sense to be loyal to the new director? Issues will begin to come up, and one of the issues that we've had in this country is that if it starts me, I will have to do everything to ensure that it doesn't work. And that's one challenge that that the government has to look on. So it is not as simplistic as we think it to be. We really need to think it through and ensure that all of the agencies have a conflict resolution mechanisms. What happens? In fact, we need to even have a plan. What happens if this fails? Right. What happens if this fails?
That should definitely be considered because one thing that people come out to say is governments are quick to make decisions, but then the implementation is always the issue. So you made mention of political will. You made mention of how we have seen the federal government make bold statements, but then when it comes to implementing it, some policies have dragged us to where we are now, shaking the economy up. So now with all of this happening, people are a bit skeptical with President Tinubu's led administration, considering even the KPI that started where he said any minister that does not do their work properly, then I'm going to hold you responsible for it. And there's a bit of now sluggish movement towards that end. So coming back to the whole political will, do you think that this would go hitch-free, considering there will be toes to step on, and definitely there will be things that would need to be shaken up?
Yeah, so, well, for me, despite the fact that I feel it's a very, very bold step, I think that this is going to be overtaken by politics. I sincerely, think so. Because if you look at, like I said, I mean, he basically left the ministry that he had several control on. So I am feeling that once there is so much of a political push, it might not appear as as we have seen.
So we're expecting a bit of backtrack.
Yeah. I mean, not just a bit. There's going to be a lot of backtrack. Some things might happen. Some of those ministries where we don't have or that are not so politically relevant can be subsumed, can be merged. But the other very stronger ones that has lots of political relevance, I rarely see that happening. And of course, the government can say we've taken the bold step. Perhaps what had happened was the fact that the Parliament did not agree with us, the legislation did not work. There are lots of escape routes to this thing. And one thing about the government from 1999 till date is the fact that they are able to make very, very bold statements, or sometimes even go ahead, but they never get to finish it.
Do you think this is just posturing? Because I assume that's what you're implying right now. This posturing, pandering to the people to make it look like they're actually trying to make a difference, and that's not the intention.
Well, I think that the difference between this government and then former President Buhari's government is the fact that this government has been very good with what are called speech acts. So they know how to tell Nigerians, don't worry, we will do these things, we know these things, and they tell Nigerians the right thing, but just that we've not been seeing the right results. I really think the problem with Nigeria at this particular point in time is the issue of corruption. If we can deal with the issue of corruption, we would have saved a lot of cost. So all of the corruption happening in the oil industry, all of the corruption that is happening in all of the ministries. I mean, these are the very, very big issues that we have. And if we don't have the courage to deal with that, even when we merge the ministries, these things are going to happen. Of course, we've talked about how it will save the overhead cost. But now let us all do this calculation together. and see whether or not it is posturing or not. So let's just say you have 100 workers in a particular agency, and then it is merged with another agency that has another 100 workers. It will mean that first off, the salaries of those workers have not changed. So you've not saved anything in that regard. And if they have offices around the country and you want to maintain those offices, it will mean you will still allocate resources to all of those offices. So it means that that has not also changed.
One of the big changes is in the anti-corruption fight. We understand that the EFCC, the ICPC, the Code of Conduct Bureau is going to be merged. I mean, clearly, we've seen ICPC do some really effective work with keeping members of the legislature, for instance, in check when it comes to constituency projects and things like that. That has almost been a predominant constituency of theirs, asking, okay, you were given X amount or things like that, and trying to connect all the dots. They've also, had some tremendous success in fighting corruption. We've seen EFCC significantly go after the big time corruption or misappropriation, allegations and charges and things like that. Also internet fraud. When you merge them with the Code of Conduct Bureau that is almost limited to civil service and things like that, how would it look like operationally speaking?
Yeah, I mean, so I would say that the only, it's going to be very, very challenging. Perhaps the only hope would be that you're merging them, not necessarily, destroying the structures that they already have, So it would mean that they'll be working under the existing structures. But perhaps the challenge will now be who now takes the lead on anti-corruption. Right. Will it be the ICPC? Will it be the Code of Conduct? Or will it even be the EFCC in anti-corruption? So those are the challenges. And what will happen is that it is either it makes anti-corruption fight more effective or very, very ineffective. So for example, among the anti-graft agencies that we have in this country, you always have the EFCC being at the spotlight. So it will mean that if you merge it with another organization that is not performing as much, it will also affect the ineffectiveness of that organization. I remember, one of the easiest way to drown in the river is to have somebody that does not know how to swim hold you down even when you can swim. Right. So I think that we have to look at some of the complex issues that we have. I expect the government to do at this particular point, and I mean they already have very, very good experts, is to look at have a consultant on some of the issues that will arise when you merge the anti-graft agencies. What are the issues that will arise when we merge the health agencies? What are the issues that will arise when we merge issues of
risk and impact assessment?
Exactly. So that will now be brought to bear. We can now begin to debate all of those issues, but let us not examine that. Let us not imagine that it's going to be all rosy, or just think that, when we do this, it is going to be a silver bullet. Let us emphasize the problem and begin to deal with them before it occurs.
I mean, if there is anything, we all know how interagency rivalry even works. So we've seen EFCC and the DSS, struggle with that back and forth.
Working together is always, the Nigerian police, the Nigerian army, NIA, DSS. There's always going to be that.
We saw that back and forth happen. But then let's come back to one of your fears that you mentioned about the legislators, might not accept all of this because it might not favor them. Does that mean that we have to now come back to the drawing board and have and make them say, maybe publicize the whole process of them going through this report and approving it for Nigerians, to know the exact reason? That way there will be transparency from them.
That's a very, very important point. If you track the subsidy removal issue, when President Tinubu said subsidy is gone, it didn't receive so much of backlash as it received during the time of Jonathan, when he said we want to remove. He didn't say it's gone. He said we wanted to remove subsidy, just a little and all of that, and then it had a lot of backlash, a lot of protests here and there. Now, what changed over that period was the fact that there were lots of civil society engagement. Even the World Bank and IMF saying, "Oh, this is draining the economy. You need to change these policies and all of that." This has not happened as such, with the Oronsaye as a report. What had happened, I mean, the media has done quite a good job in publicizing the report, but in terms of civil society engagement with this report, civil society speaking up also to say, "Oh, this part of the report is good, this part we think needs to be changed," and all of that, and even having, some community dialogue, stakeholders dialogue across board, that has not been done. So I am guessing that when it gets to the National Assembly, what will happen is that, many people will feed on the ignorance of the citizens, because I can imagine how many people even know this report and what it entails, really. So they will feed on the ignorance of the citizens. So the idea will be that, oh, well, I am representing you, and it appears that one of our brothers heading one of the agencies, wants to be removed, maybe because he is not from the ethnic group of the president. And once that happens, and that has to the already increasing protests that we have across board, looking at the hardship that we have, we can't risk it in Nigeria, because we already have issues of conflict, protests in relation to hardship and all of that. So we have to be very, very careful. So it means that we have to really, the media has to do a very good job in sensitizing the people. Civil society has to do a very good job, but it would mean that they need to engage media experts, engage civil society organizations.
This particular administration, you have to give it that they're not afraid to take unpopular decisions. Whether it's moving FAN headquarters from Abuja to Lagos, and part of the CBN from Abuja to Lagos, which has also caused quite the controversy. This, you can imagine, is going to multiply that controversy by a factor of 10 perhaps, because every part of the country will be affected by this particular decision. But in weighing the pros and cons of this one, you've talked about how it has its, positive side, and of course the not so positive side, which could also be counterproductive if we factor it in. But give me a sense of, if you put it on a scale, which is going to outweigh which, the net positive or the net negative? Is this something that after everything is said and done, we're going to look back and say, "Oh, thanks to the president for taking that bold step, because we're doing much better now"? After,
or take the step,
would we look back and say, "Oh, that's where the problem started"?
Now, because we removed
that's where
it.
the problem started because of this. Yeah.
Well, all things being equal, by all things being equal, I mean no corruption. By all things being equal, I mean there is no interagency rivalry or anybody trying to sabotage the process. By all things being equal, I would mean that we have, a good risk assessment of all of the measures and subsuming that we have. I think we're going to look back and say we did the right thing. I mean, I've even argued for the fact that, there is no need for us to have different levels of what we call state level policing, because it will just be basically creating different spheres of antagonistic relationship in some instances if it is not well managed. So I believe that having those central systems will work. But how will we make that work? It will be in a multi-layered arrangement, just like I will argue in the policing argument that we have a Nigerian police force. Why don't we make it multi-layered? By multi-layered, many definitions to it, but I don't actually mean state policing. So if we have all of this, for example, the Ministry of Environment. Now we have at one point I thought it was the right thing before. Before that was changed. We had what they call a Department of Climate Change under the Ministry of Environment. Now we have a National Council for Climate Change, separate from the Ministry of Environment. So we are creating more. And really. So the whole idea is that we will look back to say we've done well, because it is easier for you to even mention the names of ministries when they are few, and now it's even difficult to teach children current affairs, because the ministries are so much that so much that you can't really even keep up anymore, and it changes all the time. The US have had 15 departments, ministries for a very long time. So I think think we are going to look back and then also be happy. And then, of course, it will reduce interagency rivalry. But let us not also forget, I mean, with the caveat that all things being equal, corruption reduced, all things being equal means that interagency rivalry has been dealt with. All things being equal mean that we've done a thorough risk management, in this instance. But I mean, in my humble opinion, I would think that the presidency should have started with with the ministers. Let us even cut down from there and know that, okay, I mean, since that affects the politics directly, we will know that this president, means business and he has separated politics from governance.
Do you think that is something that the president would do? It will be a major step to take for the administration. Do you think that's something he would do?
He has taken quite some very, very bold steps, and if he does that, that will also be, it will win the hearts of a lot of Nigerians, and we want to see that coming. But we know how the politics works. Yeah. Of course, politicians and their ways. Of course, they're already thinking of 2027. So that most of the calculations that we have and the big cabinet that we have, of course, they will argue that it is for efficiency and effectiveness. But we also know, that it is also a political calculation. So what do you want to take out? And how will you go to that state to seek the votes in the nearest future?
In talking about the timeline, 12 weeks. Aren't we running faster than our shadow, as most people would say? I mean, it doesn't sound like 12 weeks is enough to have structurally, address all those issues around, assets, liabilities, projects, programs that need to be, consolidated and things like that. Do you think 12 weeks is enough to effect some of these changes, the mergers, the subsuming one agency under another, changing the modus operandi of an agency into a department, like what we have with the Inland Waterways and other agencies like that? Do you think the timeline works with regards to doing what you need to do with legislation, but also implementing it operationally? So
I've said it before that 12 weeks is very, very, very ambitious. And this will really, for those of us that that study governance, this will really show how the fraternal relationship between the executive and the legislature. Because I imagine that when this gets to the House, of course, this is the most diverse assembly that we've seen. There'll be lots of pushback here and there and all of that. But I mean, if this is passed, and passed already within a short period of time, everything is done, and then ministries and all of those things are done. I mean, it will really be very, very, very strange. But I mean, nothing is actually impossible, depending on the game plan that the president, already has in place. But I will think that it is very, very ambitious. I will say at least the minimum that we could go on this would be 6 months. 6 months, because you need to first do a thorough audit of the agencies. So it is not just merging. Like I said, I mean, the one negative consequence that we might possibly have, it's merging an agency that is not productive with an agency that has been very productive. So I will think that there needs to be a thorough audit of the agencies to able to say, okay, when were we established? What is your mandate? What have you achieved since you've been established? And then we now know that, okay, fine, it appears that your mandate has been this and that, but you've achieved very little in that regard. We are scrapping you. So those report has to be to the public domain. So when for example, the government says we want to scrap a particular agency, the public perhaps would have seen that thoroughly from the audit report, this agency has not been productive as it should be. Then after that, there needs to be a risk assessment of merging these agencies. Does it have a security risk? Does it have an economic risk? Does it even have a risk of collaboration or interagency rivalry when they work together? Then that will be done. Then the other aspect will now be looking at the socio-cultural context what will happen if I remove people from this particular place? And then now that we now have all of these agencies, perhaps want to merge them. Let's say for example, let's say we now have 200 agencies. Who are the heads of these agencies? Does it fit into the federal character arrangement of Nigeria? How are we going to even publicize these things to Nigeria to ensure that they understand that it is for effectiveness and for efficiency and not on patronage basis? How do we do that? These things take a lot of time. Unfortunately, the president does not have that luxury of time and as much goodwill because of the economic hardship. So he's going to be doing this in a time where a lot of fake news will come to the fore, a lot of misinterpretation will come to the fore. So at this particular point in time, I don't envy those in that position, because whether they do what is right or what is wrong, it is going to be interpreted in the most in the most malicious manner.
You see so many executive directors become heads of departments now, because these big agencies are now given a much smaller mandate compared to what they're operationally doing before now. So it's akin to a head boy becoming a class rep, and you have to deal with that. You're still in charge.
You always bring this.
I mean, I have to use an analogy that the people can relate to, right? But obviously, at the end of the day, the result would justify whether this was a good action or not. As you did say, it is one thing that would clearly polarize viewpoints across the country. There are a lot of people who are saying, cheering the president on, cheering the administration on, saying this is good for Nigeria to streamline our government and to make it smaller, because this bloating has been ongoing for quite some time.
But there's that fear again, Abdullahi, about the corruption he mentioned. And Nigerians are known for being put through a lot of stress, and then at the end of the day, it would be for nothing. So imagine if it comes out that all of these things is made and they're able to save up some money, but then someone just want to sabotage the economy and just siphon that money, misappropriation.
I suppose then we're making the corruption smaller then. No. I mean, make it smaller so that there are few people that you can hold responsible for this. But anyway, I don't think it's a foolproof situation. Just because the government is small doesn't mean that corruption is going to come to an end. But I guess in the next weeks or days to come, we will definitely have a lot more insight into some of these developments as the government continues to tell us more and give us more insight as to how it hopes to achieve this new normal that is trying to become the reality with the implementation of the Oronsaye report that has been laying dormant for quite some time now, even though it's been partly implemented over the years by several other administrations that came after the Goodluck administration. Thank you most kindly, Mr. Angilapo, as always. We really do appreciate your insight and your analysis. Thank you so much for joining us on the program this morning.
Thank you.
All right. We're going to take a quick break now. When we come back, we'll give you an update on the ongoing nationwide protests across the country, and then segue into the newspapers to bring you up to speed with the headlines for today. More on that after the break. All right, welcome back to the program. This is still Daybreak on Trust TV. Time to take a look at the front pages of some select national dailies this morning to give you a sense of the stories making the headlines today. And as always, we begin with the front page of the Daily Trust newspaper for today. And here is what it looks like. For Tuesday, February 27, 2024, House of Representatives conclude constitution amendments, or to conclude constitution amendment in 24 months. I would have said just 2 years, because that's the equivalent of 22 months. So they just inaugurated the committee yesterday, and they have the same responsibility as the Senate to look into amendments, reviews, and some of the imperfections that need to be addressed. More on that on page 11. Real sector starved of forex, according to NECA. Water scarcity hits the FCT. Which parts of the FCT? Look at page 8 on the Daily Trust newspaper today to find out more details on that story. The big story is talking about the protests that rocked parts of Lagos, Osun, and in Benin City in Edo State yesterday over the ongoing economic hardship in the country. Federal government labor meeting deadlocked. IG puts officers on red alert, warns troublemakers. Begin food importation now, TUC tells federal government. In other news, bandits displace 10 communities in Kaduna. Again, bandits displace 10 communities in Kaduna. So you think we have the security situation under control? Not really. The details of this one on page 6. 7 killed in Benue cult clash. That disturbing development is available for you to read further on page 7. Gaza war, U.S. airman set self ablaze outside Israeli embassy in protest of the humanitarian catastrophe that is currently unfolding in Gaza. And below that, or the bottom of the strip, is the Oronsaye report. EFCC, ICPC, CBB, that's a Code of Conduct Bureau, to merge PTAD, PTDF, NIWA, to be scrapped. The details of this and more on the Oronsaye report implementation following the Federal Executive Council's approval of 100% implementation on page 10 of the Daily Trust newspaper for today. That's it on the front page of the Daily Trust.
All right, let's take a look at the Guardian newspaper this morning. The major story that says lean administration after bloated cabinet. Tinubu OK's Oronsaye report and merger of MDAs. You find that major story on page 6. The federal government OK's social security payment to vulnerable families and graduates. In pending strike, federal government and ASU in endless tango over unfulfilled promises. And there's a pictorial of President Tinubu, former President Jonathan.
That is a very
yeah.
peculiar choice for President Jonathan, because I was struggling to say, is that President Goodluck Jonathan? He hasn't looked this young in a very long
forever.
time. Yeah.
I think he made digitalization, and it happened.
Just a digital
All right, so there is Oronsaye there, and we have George Akume. Below the pictorial, we have the Niger border still shut despite ECOWAS lifting sanctions. I mean, that doesn't speak well of the ECOWAS then. We have the hardship, the federal government and Labour in emergency talks over planned nationwide strike. I mean, this is referring to yesterday.
In a deadlock, so maybe the Guardian has to catch up on that.
So Constitution Amendment, reps prioritize the state's police, women in governance and others. Ex-PAM secretaries plan colloquium to boost the public service and honor Asiodu. And yeah, there is still the whole the
promotional infographics.
Yes, that's from the Information Ministry. So yeah, these are some of the stories on the Guardian newspaper this morning.
Finally, we take a look at the Blueprint, newspaper for today. Familiar news stories: FCT to crush 130 impounded vehicles. The VIO is responsible for tackling that. I think these are some of these developments that are rather common. TUC to NLC: your protests not solution to nation's current hardship. Really? Did the TUC actually say this? Submits 15-point proposal as long short-term measures. Nance back out. Federal government wants protest shelved. Police operatives on red alert. And the front page there, you see some pictures of the Minister of Finance and Economy, the Minister of Information, and recently one of the federal commissioners of the Population Commission that was also sworn in yesterday during or before the Federal Executive Council meeting at the State House yesterday. Key ministries to merge as FEC, as the Federal Executive Council OK's Oronsaye report 12 years after, and it also breaks down some of those affected departments and agencies of government.
All right, quickly, let's look at the Vanguard newspaper. Now, the major story is, replicating on everything happening concerning the rally being echoed in most parts of the country. And there's also the reputation of, the Tinubu reducing MDAs to a sizable amount. But then this one here beside says Nigeria will work if Southeast works optimally. Now that's according to the Vice President Kashim Shettima. He said Lights Up Nigeria project will spur Southeast industrialization, says Mba. Now this is something that if you want to take a dive into, then you can find that on page 9. Political risks, regulatory concerns threaten infrastructure funds. TUC advising the government also to open importation for food items to minimize, the inflation prices in Nigeria when it comes to food. And there is Edo Guba, Idahosa's men petition Ganduje and wants Uzodima's report upheld. There's still drama going on in Edo. Now, these are some of the stories on the Vanguard newspaper this morning. And right now, we'll head on to review the front pages. So we have, as usual, every Tuesday, Dr. Theophilus Abba, the Daily Trust Foundation Program Director. Thank you so much for joining us.
Good morning.
Good
Thank you so much for stopping by this morning.
Thank you.
I have to say, in the interest of full disclosure, I think Sumaya informed you to suggest that I took a leave. Just because I haven't
so
appeared
you had
on
to
the
bring
show
it up here.
Yes, I have to make it clear. Just to make it clear. I never was on any leave. But it's good to see you this morning, Doctor.
Well, right. It's good to see you as well.
Right. So where do we start from? Obviously, the protest. Yesterday, we got a feeling of what has become the new normal now for Nigerians to ventilate and to show their dissatisfaction with the way the government at federal and at state level are handling this particular situation, setting the stage for today's protest. That we understand that the federal government was not able to convince the NLC to shelve this idea of the national protest. But what do you think this signpost, given what we've been experiencing over the past couple of months?
Well, my own opinion is that it's not about the NLC's protest, but it's about what government does. For those of us who really feel it, you go to the market today, you bought something for maybe 5,000. The next day you go there, it's 7,000. You go again, it becomes 10,000. There was an experience that a woman had. She was just narrating it to me, and it led to a clash. She went to the market. Greki market, got some cartons of Indomie which she sold in her shop, and then suddenly she received an alert of about 70-something thousand naira. She said, what did you buy from my shop that was worth 70-something thousand naira? Because even the Indomie she stocked, it was just to make up. And then suddenly she called the attendant at the shop. I said, look, what happened? Who bought something worth 70-something thousand? Say, somebody came and packed all the Indomie and paid. Say, hey, how did it happen? How much did you sell it? So I sold it for some amount of money. Someone say, why would somebody come and pack the whole Indomie? She just called the market. I said, look, how much
is the price? Right.
So she was told that she left the market in the morning. Indomie was about 12,000, but by afternoon it had jumped about 17,000. So this guy who knew, the change in the price, rushed to the shop and said, look, do you have Indomie? Say, how much? She said, he just packed everything, and that led
planning to go and sell.
Yes, you understand. So something that was 12,000 in the morning becomes 17,000 in the afternoon. Those are the things that government should handle, as far as I'm concerned. It's not about sitting down with NLC and say, "Oh, NLC, don't go and protest." Don't push. People will protest because things are very, very difficult. Okay, this morning I went to the petrol station to buy fuel. It had been increased. You understand? It had been increased. And then, I was shocked. I got there, what does it say? It's now 680. And I understand that those of us in Abuja are even lucky. It goes higher. These are the things to handle. Now you talk about, the cost of living. If people cannot predict what happens the next day, people cannot plan. You don't have money. And the money that the little that you have, you cannot even use to obtain things that you need. So people are now finding it difficult to even purchase things that they need on a daily basis. Government must do something about all these things. It's not like, NLC is protesting, they are fifth columnists, they are misguided. No, that is not the issue. The issue is dealing with what we are facing.
Doctor, at this point, the presidency, the federal government knows that Nigerians are knowledgeable about all of these things. One of the grievances of the NLC was the transportation where the federal government promised to create CNG buses in order to reduce cost of transportation for masses around the country. And people haven't even seen the federal government do that. And I guess that is why, even after the meeting yesterday, it's still on a deadlock. So at this point, would you say that, because after this, we're expecting the NLC might come out to say, okay, finally, we've done this protest. We would definitely have to go on this strike. And the NLC pointed out that they took that as a last resort, like they want to take that rather as a last resort. So that's why they are doing this protest. So do you think that the government will be able to get at least some of their demands, done before it leads to that?
Well, if the way I see this government thinking is different from the way NLC and those of us who are affected are thinking. The government feels that the excess money that they are moped up from the society, from people, the poor people, should be given to state government. And we are not seeing the state government responding. You understand? Okay, you get, the allocations, the money allocation has skyrocketed. But we don't see the state government providing vehicles. We don't see them augmenting anything.
Right.
You understand? So, the Tinubu government is saying, okay, this fund will be channeled through this approach. Now, and we are not seeing them doing what they ought to do. For instance, we're talking about the conditions.
Yeah, just a moment, Doctor. I believe we have Ajibade Praise standing by for us, just to give us feelers on this particular issue of the protest and to understand how things are shaping up. As we did promise, we're going to go across the country to our various correspondents just to give you feelers of how things are shaping up, and then we'll come back to the studio. Ajibade, good morning. Thank you very much for joining the broadcast. What can you tell us about how things are shaping up as far as the protest is concerned? It appears we do have a challenge, Ajibade. We're struggling to hear you. I believe there's a problem with the connectivity. We're going to work on that and perhaps circle back to Ajibade in a moment's time to get some kind of update on things like that, on things of relating to the protest. Kano, for instance, we understand that the gathering is just beginning to gain momentum, and we'll circle across different parts of the country just to give you feelers. So we'll work on that connectivity and circle back to Ajibade in a moment.
Any time that the network needs to favor the media, it's now. So exactly. I don't think we should be having that problem.
Because we need to make sure that the people understand that it's supposed to be a peaceful protest, and the more people understand that, the more peaceful it will remain throughout the day, hopefully. So please, Doctor, apologies for the interruption. Go ahead. You were talking about
and the states.
Yeah, the states. And everybody keen into addressing this.
Yes, what I'm saying is that a lot of money is being channeled to state governments, and we are not seeing them, distributing, what they ought to distribute. For instance, we are saying, okay, Tinubu is not providing the CNG buses. If the state government have got so much money, why can't they distribute the CNG buses? Why can't they buy vehicles? Why can't they, find a way of bringing down the prices of food items? There's an example that we give. Although it happened under the military. But there's nothing wrong in maybe picking something from the military if it is good. The PTF days, in those days we understand that there was scarcity of drugs. And PTF say, okay, now we are going to manufacturers. You produce this drug, we are going to pay you at this rate. You understand? And you supply to hospitals. You understand? And then these hospitals, sold this drug out, or maybe we gave them out free at a rock bottom price to patients. Now, is there no way that government can enter into agreement with some, even let me say rice manufacturers, for instance, those two manufacturers say, look, we are manufacturing rice, we are producing rice for Nigeria. Now we want this rice to be sold at this rate, we'll augment it, because when people go out to protest, it's not as if they love protesting. Nobody wants to leave his job. Nobody wants to leave the comfort of his house to go and protest. It's because of what Nigerians are feeling. We are not seeing government taking the right steps. Yesterday we were hearing that government said, okay, they are going to distribute funds to the vulnerable, and then even the list or how they came about the list of those who are vulnerable Nigerians is still doubtful. Even governors were saying, we don't trust this list that you are using. and then you want to go and distribute. How will you be sure that that money will reach those who call vulnerable? How do you determine how vulnerable they are? And we are saying that this money should be put in things that will affect everybody. Can you use this money to bring down the cost of drugs in primary health care? Can you use this money to do some other things that will affect people more positively, not necessarily giving people cash and say, okay, you take 5,000, you take 25,000. You know, but you see, the issue is that the way the government is thinking, so that's different from the way Nigerians are thinking. So government thinks, government seems to be taking steps, but Nigerians are not feeling the impact of those steps. And that's why you can have this kind of protest. People will come out in their number to say, we don't agree with what is happening.
Indeed.
Okay, I believe we have Ajibade now back. Let's give it another try. Hopefully the connectivity will allow us to have a conversation. Ajibade, good morning once again. What do we know about how the protest is shaping up? You're in Lagos now, but what can you tell us about some of your findings so far?
Yes, the feelers we're getting is that secretariat of Imo NLC has been taken over, not taken over, let me not use the word taken over. There is heavy presence of security agencies, the police. Earlier on, I sent in a video and some pictures to that effect, showing that there is heavy presence of police, in that particular arena. Also, we also noticed that the protesters, the workers who intend to embark in the protest are coming in one after another gradually. Though there are some little apprehensions as to why the heavy presence of security in, their secretariat. But that's where they are together. And once they gather, of course, there will be briefing and all that. Then from there, they will proceed, marching on the road, on the streets of Owerri, down to a major roundabout where they call Okigwe roundabout, which is exactly opposite the government house, where they intend also to deliver a letter to the state governor, Senator Hope Uzodinma. But however, earlier on, I chatted with one of the workers, and the person of Comrade Ofuegu, who is the former chairman of NLC in the States, who said clearly that the police presence there shouldn't cause any apprehension, that they are just there to protect the law-abiding citizens who are out to protest peacefully this morning. He gave assurance that earlier they've been to the Commissioner of Police office, that's CP Danjuma Aboki, who assured them of maximum protection of the police during the protest. As a matter of fact, he said the police are equally part of the process as well, that every Nigerian, is touched by what is going on in the country, and they are all out to contribute their quota and ensure it is a success today. So, well, it's still, in the early hour of it, we're watching and hoping to give more updates as things unravel.
Right.
Quickly, I would want to know the turnout, number there. I mean, you're in Lagos, so have you seen any activities, in Lagos happening? And also from Imo, what is the turnout looking like? Are people really coming out en masse, to join in this protest?
Yeah, in Lagos, I would tell you to be told, but it's more of mixed feelings, kind of. Some are saying the protest will have no effect. Some are saying there is even point going to protest. Why are we protesting? And some are even saying a lot has been said already. A lot has been communicated already that if the government wants to act, they should act. That some are saying going to protest and all that could be a waste of time. But of course, yes, some are still coming out, little by little. I want to believe it's going to build up. I want to believe it's going to get to that climax where we'll see a lot of people taking part in it. But as it stands now, it's still a question of should we not? People are gathering, sampling opinions here and there. And the same thing is also playing out in Imo as well. But that will be more what we just notice seriously is that police is all out to ensure it is a peaceful protest. And people, the normal Nigerian, when they come out to a place and they see heavy presence of security, there's this fear. There's this apprehension, that comes with it. And that also might affect the turnout. People might just want to stay away because they don't know
we definitely can relate to it. I mean, whether people come out or not, I think we're all in agreement that everybody is dissatisfied with the state of affairs. Even the people in power will agree with that summation. Ajibade, thank you very much for the update. Right now, we really do appreciate the situation report. Thank you very much. I will circle back definitely during the course of the day as some of these developments continue to progress. We also believe that Ado Musa and Idris Jibrin are standing by for us in Kano and in Jos to give us a situation report as things unfold. We will circle back to them in just a moment. Back in the studio, we still have Dr. Theophilus Abba helping us analyze some of the stories on the front pages of the papers this morning. And Doctor, away from the protest, the only big story else that everybody else is talking about is the Oronsaye report implementation. The Tinubu administration seems to be going down this line of doing the difficult work of taking unpopular decisions that they believe is going to get the job done for Nigeria and Nigerians. What is your take on this recent pronouncement that it is going to 100% implement the Oronsaye report?
Well, I was shocked when I learned that the president is thinking about implementing the Oronsaye report 100%. If I remember, it was in 2011, and it's a dated report, actually. It's an old report. And when you have a report that is old, you need to take a critical look at it before you talk about implementing the contents of the report. Something that happened a report that was compiled over 12 years ago should not be a report that you say you are going to implement 100%. So I feel that saying that it will be implemented 100% is an error. You see, if the committee is asked to review the reports, then we understand that they are going to take a look at the report. I remember the Buhari administration also thought of implementing it. But when they went through the report, they discovered that, look, several sections of that report can no longer be implemented. And that is why they dropped it. Now, my own feeling is this. Number one, this idea of going back and forth. You see, when government set up these agencies, they were meant to achieve some objectives. Now, the question I'll ask is that, are we saying that those objectives are no longer necessary? Let me give you an example. If you go to some countries, they have the Minister of Railway Transport. You have Minister of maybe water resources. We always have water, but we have Minister of Water Resources. We have Minister of Steel. Now, why don't you say, oh, rail is part of transportation, merge them? Some of these things were done in order to deal with, to be focused, in achieving some objectives. Like now, we are talking about the nomadic education being merged with UBEC, for instance. Now, what was the objective of the nomadic education? The objective was saying, look, these guys are nomad, they move from place to place. Let's provide opportunity for them to have education. If these things were implemented the way it ought to have been implemented, maybe some of the crises we have now would not have them. So the issue is, as far as I'm concerned, this is a personal opinion. Of course, everybody knows I'm sharing a personal opinion. I don't believe in scrapping. What I believe is that let us go back and say, okay, these guys ought to do their jobs. They will have many agencies of government. There was even a time I saw a vehicle. We're talking about something of pollution, or sound pollution or air pollution. And I said, I didn't know there was anything like this. You understand? So if we even have a department in government or an agency of government that deals with pollution, then if they were doing their jobs, you understand, we will have less pollution.
But don't you also believe that there is a duplication?
It's not about duplication
of efforts, or that some of these agencies are no longer fit for purpose, and we need to scrap them because of what it costs to keep them in operations.
Okay, number one, you see, when you talk about duplication, by the time you look at them, look at the FCC and ICPC. Sincerely, their jobs are different. You understand? If the FCC does what it's supposed to do, and ICPC does what it's supposed to do, we can fight corruption. Even the CCB, if the CCB does what it's supposed to do, they will beat down corruption. You see, all these things were being handled by the police in the past. The police was in charge of all this investigation, the prosecution of criminals and all the 419. Police was handling it. But the police did not do it properly. That was why, okay, they said, let us take part of these things from them and give to a specialized agency.
But doctor, you're one of the advocates of cutting governance. I know we've had that discussion with you. So if it's not done through the MDAs, what other aspects, is the federal government supposed to cut the cost of governance?
No, they have that ways of cutting costs. It's not. What I'm concerned is that one, there were objectives for setting up this agency. It's not about cost cutting. I don't know whether if I'm actually communicating. There were reasons why these things were set up. If they were not meeting those objectives, we should ensure that they meet those objectives. You understand? Now you say they're overlapping. Now if you say okay, EFCC, ICP, CCB come together. From the little I know about EFCC, they have so much work. They have so much work that they cannot, the kind of petition they receive every day. The opportunities for investigation that EFCC has is overwhelming. You know, say, okay, we merge you with ICPC, CCB, and then we reduce staff. You understand? You see, the workload will be much more. Even the ICPC, they have so much work.
The minister said nobody will lose their job. So
well,
far.
If nobody will lose their job, so why are you doing it? Because the idea of merging and all this is to say, okay, let's cut costs. Is it not part of cost? The objective of the original report, the spirit was cutting the cost of governance, reducing it.
Well, doctor, at the end of the day, this is a conversation that would continue to go on.
I have 12 weeks before it's
exactly. So 3 months and even beyond.
No, we say that the president is courageous. No, the kind of courage that is not well thought out will lead us into crisis.
Well, we'll just have to wait and see how it goes. So thank you so much, Dr. Theophilus Abba, for your thoughts on all of this, happening today. We appreciate your time and your review. I appreciate that. And of course, that we have come to the end of today's show. Thank you so much for staying with us. I mean, there's a lot happening. In due course, we'll bring you more on the NLC protest happening in Nigeria. Thank you so much for watching. I am Sumaya Abubakar. To have a lovely day.
And my name is Abdullah Ahmed. Thank you as always for joining us on the program. We'll be back tomorrow live at 8. Until then, good morning and enjoy the rest of your day.